Well, thank you, Mo, for joining the podcast with Imran Sheikh. And you're in New York right now, right?
Yeah. I'm in New York, been here for a year and a half now.
Wow. Wait, year and a half?
Yeah.
When did you guys move?
Summer of 23.
And
No,
where were
20,
you?
sorry, 22.
And you were before that in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, San Francisco.
Oh, I don't know why did I feel like it's been like 4 years since you moved. Okay. My memory is corrupt. So, but anyways, today we have Moe Min. He is SVP for Marketing Technology, correct?
Hmm.
For Wells Fargo. And before I go a little bit deeper, today I want to try to, talk to you more about the, marketing landscape when it comes to MarTech technologies in the banking industry. We can
Yeah,
try to go a bit deeper, with
yeah.
constraints a little bit and all. And then the second thing I want to really talk about is effective ways that, how can you leverage customer data by, of course, maintaining the privacy, all that good stuff. And then lastly, we can talk more about innovation, leveraging AI in some form. If not, what are some existing ways? But before we get started, a introduction from the man himself would be cool. So over to you, Mo.
All right. Thanks, Imran. So I'm Senior Vice President of marketing personalization at Wells Fargo. And so, what does that mean, right? Like, so personalization, MarTech, those things are often used, terms that can mean different things to different people. And so the way I try to explain it is, when a customer interacts with Wells Fargo channel, like going to mobile banking, walking into a branch, talking to a banker, uh, you know, they are presented with messages, right? Either directly, like you see a banner ad, or a message on your mobile app, or a banker or a teller is saying, "Hey, Imran, you know, you're here to do XYZ transaction, you know, would you also be interested in X, right?" Like, so those things are what personalization powers, right? It is to create a relevant um, interaction with the customer, no matter which channel they happen to be interacting with, right? And I think the unique space that financial services sort of sits in, right, is that is different than a regular consumer customer channel or a company. Is one, we have a ton of data, right? Like
Mhm.
literally every time you're swiping your credit card or doing your debit card transaction, or you have a
Yeah.
car loan or mortgage, we have all of that data,
Yeah.
right? We know your FICO score, we know your income, we know all your transactions, and so there's such a richness of data that is not present in most places. The other sort of richness of data is also in the uh, in the interactions that the customer is having across different channels, right?
Yeah.
So most of the companies are mono channel, right? Like especially the newer ones are like, oh, we're only like mobile first, like web only, and like you know they look at a physical store as like almost like, oh, what is that, right? Um, and but with large banks, right, the customer, that there's value in the customer being able to interact in any which way they want to.
Mhm.
Uh, and we get data across all of those interactions. Some people never walk into a branch because they're like, hey, I do all my banking on my mobile app. Great,
Yeah.
right? But believe it or not, there is a very significant volume of customer that like walking into a branch and talking to a teller or a banker, right? Because keep in mind, you're not buying widgets off of your bank.
Mhm.
Most of the time, you're dealing with money, or you need
Yeah.
financial advice, right? Like, so there's tremendous value in being able to converse with an actual person, right? And even more so when you are running into issues like potential identity theft, fraud, right? You really want to talk to a person. You
Yeah.
don't want to be talking to a chatbot, right?
That's
So that also sort of gives us a unique opportunity to like, okay, how do we leverage all of these interactions, right, to make it meaningful? And so, but there is also a very unique set of guardrails that also sort of constrict or where we have to be super careful. Just like how we know everything about you,
yeah.
from your FICO score to your income to your transactions. It doesn't mean that we can use that stuff any way we want, right?
So I have a question on that one.
Yeah,
So that was one thing like people may not know. So what's the process then where is there a process that the customers along like I know there's opt-in, opt-out, but
yeah.
from you like how does the customer know in this experience that their data is being leveraged, what is being leveraged for,
Yeah,
you know?
sure. We certainly provide like opt-in, opt-out is your most basic one, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, would you like to get marketing messages from Wells Fargo in
Yeah.
email or phone? Yes, no, right? Like every customer has that choice. Um, um, you know, but there are also things that customer gives to us, uh, as part of their account open where, if they like, for example, if you want to get a credit card, right?
Yeah.
You have to tell us how much money you make. You don't really have a choice, uh, right? And we have to check your credit score.
Yeah.
That's not an option, right? Like so, but however, we are banks are very constrained in what we can do with that data, right? So, for example, let's just sort of we are governed by a whole slew of government regulations,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So for example, I can't just say, oh, let's look up Emron's like credit score just for the hell of it, and then just to see. You can't do
Yeah.
that, right? Like, so if I start looking at, customers' credit, I
Mhm.
have to, I have to have a legitimate reason. And
Yeah.
I have to, depending on the circumstances, actually present you with an offer of credit, right? I can't just randomly mine your credit data for the fun of it, right? And then we are also governed by fair lending, and all those things. So I'll give you another really good contrast, right? Like, so if you are selling clothing,
Mhm.
right? Let's just say you're selling clothing on Instagram or TikTok or
Yeah.
wherever. As an advertiser, right? What are the first things that you pick? Hey, I want to target male or female, age between, you know, 15 and 25 or whatever your age range, right? And
Yeah.
then, oh, I want to target people who live, in these areas, right? That's a very like standard targeting that you would do when you're selling clothing.
Yeah.
Literally everything that I just told you will be illegal for us to do. Like I cannot target. So the only targeting by age I can do is you have to be over 18 because you have to be legally the adult to sign
Mhm.
a financial document. But what I cannot do is, hey, I only want to target 35 to 50 years old because they have the most amount of income, right? And oh, by the way, I want to target only people who live in the rich neighborhood, right? That's called redlining.
Yeah.
uh, right? Like, and if I target by age or sex, like, hey, I only want to target male or female. Again, it's all called protected class data, and those are explicit laws actually that exist to protect customers, right?
Yeah.
So that banks are not discriminating against them, in an unfair manner, right? And so while that it's true that banks have a ton of data,
Yeah.
we we can't use it in the same way as would be okay in non-financial services, right? So I just, those are like your like really easy to understand, like
Yeah.
age, income, sex. Very standard targeting segmentation that you would do in any other place, illegal to do
Yeah.
in banking.
So basically demographics are totally out of questions, right? Like for example, like you said, like the gender, the age,
Yeah.
probably race as well, like
Mhm.
that as well. Like you can't. So with that being said, so there's a lot of abundance of data, right? So just to pivot a little bit and just to talk more about, because I was in MarTech, right? Like work,
Yeah.
life, ramp, short boost, and even should. So how then a bank could go and have strategic marketing initiatives by targeting audience? So keep it even simple
Yeah.
for some audiences. How can they have effective
Yeah.
marketing? Because then you can't target, right? So now you have
You
to.
can, correct. You cannot explicitly target, right? So, however, you can absolutely develop very sophisticated targeting models, right? And these days, right, like, most financial institutions employ hundreds of, data scientists, right,
Mhm,
and model builders. And we use extensively, very sophisticated models,
mhm.
in our targeting, right?
Yeah,
So, however, right, and this is really key to understand.
yeah.
We have to be very mindful of the fact that our models are not inadvertently sort of impacting certain protected class customers, right? Like, so if 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 certain models, if you don't check on them, right,
Mhm,
can automatically start to skew towards like, hey, I'm just not going to, show my ads to, any, males, because, and it suddenly heavily skews towards female. Like
yeah.
you have to constantly keep an eye on it and readjust the model. So I think that's the key difference, right? Is that you definitely have very sophisticated data and model driven targeting in financial services. However, you have to take extra care to make sure that are you able to be effective without ending up with unintentional discriminatory practices?
Yeah, that's supposed to be another question. So like let's say you expand your data set, right? So you're
Yep.
not going after demographics, but let's say the person involved as a marketing, let's say the CMO, or not the CMO, but like the person responsible to run marketing knows that I'm just gonna pick a random example, like a LV purse, or let's even like lower down, like a Michael Kors purse, right? You know who you're targeting to,
Mhm.
right? So it's mostly skewing towards genders who are female. Of course, they could
Mhm.
be different gender as well, but would there be like how are these stringent rules, like even though you're not trying to, but indirectly you are going against the protected class or you're going for the protected class, how is that regulated then? Like because it seems like there's a lot of scrutiny with banking
Yeah. Oh
sector,
yeah,
right?
there is. We All of our models are reviewed at least annually, right? To ensure that we're not sort of having those unintended consequences, right? And the way that we try to think about this is not necessarily uh, targeting male, female, or whatever. It's we kind of flip it. It's how like how can we tailor our products, certain sets of products to customers who need them the most,
Yeah.
right? So think about it this way, right? If I, um, you can try to uh, uh, guess, right? Like, hey, if I am selling a brokerage product,
Yeah.
right? Then clearly, I it's okay to target based on potential household net worth, right? Like it doesn't make from a the key is like are we offering products and services that meets the customer's needs, right? So let's just say, Imran, that let's say that you are a 21-year-old that just graduated from college,
Mm-hmm.
right? We should be tailoring our financial services to meet your need, right? So your need may not be, right, like, hey, let's open up a brokerage account with $500,000, because guess what?
Yeah.
You don't have $500,000.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it should be like, hey, Imran, like, we can help you build your credit, right? So that you can start to build credit history now that you're entering into adulthood, right?
Yeah.
And then, because ultimately one day you're going to want a car loan, you're going to want a
Yeah.
mortgage, right? Like, so we want to provide the products that fit your need. And your need as a 21-year-old straight out of college is going to be very different than let's say, somebody else who's like 50 years old, established, and
Yeah.
they do have a lot of money, and their primary focus is like, hey, I need to grow my investments so I can retire,
Yeah.
right? So the conversation that you're going to have with that 50-year-old is very different, right? And so that's how to think about it, is how do you focus on the having that right conversation to meet the right need? Because if I like, and that's to me what personalization is about, right?
Yeah.
Like, just to go back, like, what is personalization, right? If I were to tell the 21-year-old, hey, open a brokerage account with $500,000, like, that
Yeah.
literally makes no sense. Right? Like, that is not personalization. That's just
Yeah.
like irrelevant messaging, right?
Yes.
And that's what we want to avoid. And so when we are putting up messages to customers, right, either directly in the form of like a banner ad, or
Mm-hmm.
indirectly, like, hey, banker, ask the customer about X, right?
Yeah.
Is we want to be able to uh, find that most relevant conversation
Mm-hmm.
for that point in time and present it to you, so that there's a much likely probability that the customer will positively respond, right? Now, it doesn't mean that the customer like loves it 100% of the time. There is no such thing, right?
Yeah.
But even if you are able to say, hey, I'm able to increase my customer response 10%, 20%, 30%, because I'm getting smarter about the relevance of the message, that's what we're going for.
So then how do you then, so you just explained me like how you're optimizing for the journey, right? So
Mhm.
let's a little bit deeper without giving us the IP
Yeah.
or anything. But like
Mhm.
for how would you explain? Because for e-commerce data, or when you have someone like Albertsons or Safeway, all those kind of folks, they have transaction value, they know the credit card, partly, but then they go to someone like LiveRamp or other services like that to expand their data set so they
Yeah.
can target in different mediums, right? Even going to Facebook. Someone like Wells Fargo, you already have these policies which are protecting class of people, right? Secondly, you can't be biased. So there's a lot of scrutiny in there with other
Yeah.
policies. And on top of that, you have to also market, right? So how is then Wells Fargo legitly like able, not Wells Fargo specifically, like banking sector is optimizing the customer journey in this case? So like
So
if I were like, are they using data points? Are they
yeah. That's a really good question, right? Like, so we're using all of the known data points as
mhm,
well as contextual data points, right? Which differ. So you asked about journeys, and journeys is another widely used term. So I'll tell you what it means, at
yeah,
least to me,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So most financial services is what we call a considered purchase, right? It is not an impulse purchase. You don't
yeah,
suddenly decide to get a mortgage because you saw a cool ad on TikTok, right? Like,
yeah,
you might go buy some shoes impulsively, but you will
yeah,
never impulsively buy a mortgage,
yeah,
right? So a lot of the times, right, the customer, and let's just take mortgage as a really good example. Like, if especially if you've never had a mortgage before, like,
yeah,
a lot of customers do like, hey, like, what's a mortgage? Like, what are the mortgage rates? Like, how do I do, like there's a lot of research that happens,
Yeah.
customer educating themselves, right? These days, a lot, they do it a lot online by themselves. Or, they may go talk to, a mortgage broker or whatever, right? Like, so every step of the way, right? From I'm thinking about buying a house all the way to I've actually applied for a loan and then you finally close on the loan, right?
Yeah.
There's dozens of potential interaction points along that journey, right? And what we're trying to do, right, is essentially help you move further and further along, right? If you're in the research mode and you're not ready to pull the trigger, that's fine, right? Like, but what we would like to do is like continue to provide you with information. So let's say you're in the research mode. Ideally, we're sending you emails about like, hey, like as you think about buying your first home, here are XYZ things to think about, right? Like just informational stuff, right? And let's say you've actually applied for a loan, right?
Yeah.
But there's a 30, 60, 90-day gap between applying for a loan and actually closing on your house, right?
Yeah.
And along that journey, we're like saying, hey, Imran, congratulations, you've been approved for a home mortgage, but don't forget, you need home insurance.
Yeah.
We can't close a loan without having you get home insurance, right? Like, so we're trying to help you move along that journey by giving you that right information at the right time in that right context, right? Like to me, that's what the journey is about, right? Is as you move along, you have the right set of information to help you get to that next stage, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing about journeys also is really important is not everybody necessarily follows the same exact steps, right? So let's say, oh, I really need to think about whether I want to buy a home or not. Like you may have the luxury of thinking about it for 6 months. Somebody is like, oh no, I got a new job in a different town. I gotta move, right? Like so my time frame is much shorter, right? Like so everybody moves at their own pace, right? So to me, that journey building is about wherever you may be or whatever speed you are trying to go, right? We're able to intercede at the right points to help you get to the next stage faster.
So, okay, so that makes sense. So it's like you are constantly learning, the whole cycle to make sure. So in the summary, it's basically you're looking for a mortgage, you get buy-in. Hey, guess what? You need insurance.
Yeah.
Gotta get that. Oh, we also have this in California, like the earthquake insurance as well. You gotta get that too. And it's like, so you have these products. So it seems like when we take this approach, optimizing, and now I'm gonna change a little bit and go towards more data privacy a little bit.
Yep.
So GDPR, I don't think so affects because Wells Fargo is mostly US based, right? But their CCPA only in California, but then there are other state laws.
Yeah.
How is that affecting your marketing strategy in this current MarTech scenario? And especially with iOS as well. I don't know if that's encountered because you guys also have an iOS app as well.
Yeah.
So how is that affecting and how you guys
I
battle?
think, yeah, I mean, that I think it affects everybody, right? Like, especially like, hey, Google sort of killing all the cookies, right? Affects everybody, not just anybody who's advertising, right? Is impacted. So I think we are moving in that direction of having, and this is where where our scale sort of helps us. Like, hey, I'm moving towards more first party data, right? Because all of these like third party cookie stuff is going to get rendered moot, right? Okay, great. We have tons of first party data, right? We also have the luxury of tens of millions of people on their own come to wellsfargo.com or open the Wells Fargo banking app because they're looking to change their looking at their balances, looking to move money, right? Like, so there's the luxury of you don't have to prompt people to come to us. They come on their own.
Yeah.
Right now, however, right, like it doesn't take away from the challenge of, well, what if I'm trying to sell a checking account to somebody who has zero relationship with Wells Fargo, right?
Yeah.
How do I do that? I still will have the same exact challenges that everybody will, once you have all the cookies and all of those rules start to change. We're just gonna have to evolve along with the industry, and that's what everybody's trying to figure out.
And so because here's a trend I'm looking at. I don't know if this would apply for the banking, but like with all this third party going away, you will see more partnerships, number one. But then we're also seeing like Netflix, they came with their own ad stack. They're like, hey, you know what? Just advertise. They're using Microsoft, but basically now they're trying to build their own. I think Disney's gonna do it as well. They already start with Hulu, right? They like as minimum as $500 you can advertise. They keep showing me that. What I'm trying to say, are we gonna see banking sector? And I think Wells Fargo may or banking sectors does have this product. Like people will come or like what I'm trying to say, let's say insurance company, they partner with Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, all these banks, offer our products to these customers. Are we gonna see kind of that approach within the banking sector in some ways?
We've always partnered. We've always had uh, uh, partnership deals. Like especially like credit card is a good example, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the credit card companies say, hey, because you are a credit card customer, you can get XY deals if you go to Best Buy, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a limited time offer on Best Buy, if you use our credit card, whatever. Those have always existed, right? And Wells Fargo always also has them. I suspect that you know um, these types of affinity advertising, definitely will you know grow and take more importance. And some are really good at it, right? Better than others, right? Especially in the credit card space, like American Express
Yeah.
is really top notch at this, right? Like, so, especially like if you're a gold versus platinum Amex user, the types of partner, like, hey, you can get these types of deals, because you're a platinum card user, right?
Yeah.
They really know how to sort of deliver that value, partnering with outside firms. And I think those are really great spaces because it makes your own product very sticky,
Yeah.
as well as customer believes that they're getting value. And then, of course, whoever is that partnering, Best Buy or whatever, is getting sales, right? Like, so that's a win-win-win situation.
Yeah. That makes sense. So you basically saying we will see more of that happening. Right.
I think so, right? I think so. I think you want to be able to leverage these sticky relationships,
Yeah.
right, to deliver value. And the other you know you know interesting thing that is very rapidly changing, and I'm personally curious as to how it will play out, is a lot of the hype around like generative AI,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I'm sure if you ask everybody, like, oh yes, we're doing this, we're doing that, right? You know, but especially, I'm very curious to see, like, especially in a highly regulated industry like banking, what's the right set of use cases for generative AI, right? Because we already have, things like, like and like most big banks have this, like you can, there's a little chat box in your app saying, hey,
Yeah.
like what's my, tell me my, spending balance pattern, right? Like,
Yeah.
it'll spit out like, say, oh, like you've been spending X number of dollars over the last X months and
Yeah.
the trend is up or down or whatever, right? Like, but that's like a very, I think to me, that is like a very beginnings of a data set. Now, wouldn't it be cool if you can, if it becomes almost like, being able to talk to a person, and it's giving you more advice, but this is where the but comes in, right? In banking, you have to be super careful, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen lots of stories of AI hallucination and
Oh yeah.
all, giving out bogus, non-existent legal use cases.
Uh,
You do not want a banking AI giving you bogus hallucinations, telling you how to plan your retirement.
yeah,
That's a
that's
really
true.
bad thing, right?
And I think to add on that, like if you think about it, like tax, right? I don't want to go into taxation, but this tax season, right? And I met this startup. It's funded by Jason. I just briefly met the guy, like just
Yeah,
said hi, and then I saw his website. I was like, oh, what does he do? So he offers tax GPT. So
yeah.
it helps you with your tax advice and everything. It's pretty cool. It's fine. It's gonna improve. What do you think of that? I know it's not MarTech specifically, but when you think of someone like Wells Fargo, we already have the volume of transactions. We know how much they're making. We have their brokerage. This is what they did. Are you going to see somewhere around that kind of use cases for AI for
I
these
I
companies?
I, I think I think one of the first use cases is going to be AI to help the human, so that the human can have a smarter conversation with the customer, right?
Yeah,
So think of it as, like, I think that's going to be the first step. Like, think of it as a productivity tool, right? You know, it's the, hey, instead of me, like, tax is a really good example, right? Instead of me like pouring manually, trying to look through all your transactions and like
yeah,
check against, well, like that's perfect for AI to do, right?
yeah,
And summarize the data and say, hey, tax preparer, Imran might be eligible for XYZ type of deduction,
yeah,
whatever. But the tax preparer needs to use their brain and say, okay, does this look right?
yeah.
Right? I think they're already trying to do this in medicine, right? Like, where you have a ton of test data
Hmm.
coming out of medical studies or labs, whatever, and crunching large volumes of data and summarizing it and presenting it back, but having the human validate it and saying, okay, that looks correct or that doesn't look correct. I think that's going to be a very much uh, uh, where I see like the very first steps of applications, right? Is um, we're gonna use AI to summarize all the data that that we know about you, right? And then come up with suggestions, right? But ultimately, like, the banker has to make the human judgment, right? So I'll give you an example, right? Like, let's say I crunch all the data and it's like, okay, Amron might be, talk to Amron about, saving for retirement, right?
Yeah,
Because based on all this stuff, like, that might be the right conversation to have. But let's say you just walked into the branch and you're all pissed off and worried because you think you had your identity stolen,
yeah,
right? And like, oh my God, like, I need to freeze my account, right?
yeah,
Okay, that's probably, the banker is going to sort of put on their human judgment and say, okay, now is probably not the right time to ask Emron about whether he wants to talk about
yeah,
retirement. Emron is really worried about fraud,
yeah.
right? Let's take care of that
This,
first, right? Like, so that's where context and human judgment really does matter. right, is the computers and the models may be really smart, right, but they don't necessarily have the best, uh, know the best or understand the situation the best at that point in time, right? So I highly suspect that at least in the next couple of years, the human layer will still be there, right? Now,
Yeah.
as you get greater and greater confidence in the machine and the model, right, then you may start to do more and more of it, without the human. Like a lot of the robo investing, it's been out
Yeah.
for a while, right? Like Wealthfront, Betterment,
Yeah.
all of the major banks have, robo investing things, right? Can these things get smarter and better over time? Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have zero doubt that it will happen, right? But I think the other conversely, right? And I just saw this in an ad when I was riding the subway. Somebody's actually advertising saying, making it a point of differentiation that, hey, when you call our customer service,
Yeah.
you are going to talk to a real human being based in the United States. That was their key differentiator in a
Wow.
subway ad, right? Because it was like, hey, am I talking to a person? And
Yeah.
it's like, yes, we are always here for you. This is not a robot. This is, and we're based onshore, right? So I suspect that while you have a lot of this artificial intelligence
Yeah.
driven interactions where there is no human, right?
Yeah.
You will have a segment of the market that is like, no, I actually want to talk to a person. And you will have companies that make it their calling card and say, yes, every time you talk to us, it's a real human being.
Yeah. Wow. I never thought of that. Like you can see that happening more aggressively, right? Like especially in
Yeah.
financial sector. Like I remember I used to have a Discover account long time
Mm-hmm.
ago, and they were very responsive. And I
Mm-hmm.
like that. Same with T-Mobile, right?
Yep.
They're very responsive, and that's why I like them because they're customer. But whenever I go to like MX, that was a bot.
Mm-hmm.
It's always like someone else. But however, I think maybe to your point, Apple Card, right? I don't want to pivot, but like whenever I reach out to Apple for like any challenges or like, hey, credit increase, there's always a human.
Yep.
They never use a bot, and I'm surprised. So I think that's one of the things I like personally.
Mm-hmm.
But no, but just to go, so you did talk about some trends, which I wanted to go into, right? So you talked about the trends, what we're looking at. What are some other trends when it comes to the banking, MarTech sector? And then how is I guess let's talk a little bit more about that one, and then we can talk more about one last question I have is like someone like Wells Fargo. I know we don't want to talk too much about AI, but like how is it at least using or leveraging, you know, in MarTech sector, in your sector specifically, with the upcoming tech, with AI, are you guys using some use
Yeah.
cases? But yeah,
I think um, I think everywhere you turn, like if you look at every major software provider, Salesforce, Oracle, whatever,
yeah,
like literally every other word is AI, right? Like so whether or not it's legit, or how AI, it's always just been there. Now they're just like slapping the AI label on it. Um, so I don't think you're going to get away from that, right? Like it's sort of like the topic du jour. And to me, AI simply just means that there are the models that underpin, whatever
yeah,
functionality, right, are getting smarter, right? Like so I think for sure, right? Like the technologies. So Wells Fargo buys technology from, like Salesforce, Oracle,
yeah,
Pega, so like they all have AI in them,
yeah,
right? So you're just sort of benefiting from that, right? However, I think the real question, and this is going to be the key comparative advantage, is how do you really use it, right? Right, and because the software companies sell the same thing to everybody,
yeah,
right? Uh, you know, it's in some ways you're buying whatever the latest and greatest is, right? But whether it really works comes down to how are you implementing it, how are you using it, and then I think especially in larger companies is how are you really managing the change that it's bringing within your organization, right? Because you can have the coolest technology, whatever that you buy from a vendor,
Mhm.
but if people don't believe it or people think like it's stupid, it's just going to fail, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not going to get the bang for the buck, right? And so to me, the yes we you know software is getting smarter, right?
Yeah.
But you have to how is that going to change the way that people do their day-to-day work?
Yes.
That to me is the real secret sauce to are you really going to be able to succeed, right, at the pace that you need to, right? Because if you don't manage the change within your own organization, um, you just bought yourself a very expensive paperweight.
Yeah. No, no, no. I like what you're saying because I have the same opinion. I feel like there are a lot of companies, not even feel. Here's my math. A lot of companies are like AI, AI. Great.
Yeah,
I think AI is more of a tool to
it
what
is a
you're
tool.
ultimately
It is a
offering,
tool. It is a tool.
right?
I mean, like if you rewind the tape like 5 years ago,
Yeah.
everybody was like, "Oh, we have some blockchain this, blockchain that."
Yes.
Even though like I was like trying to figure out like what the hell does blockchain have to do with it? Like nothing. It was just like
It's
the
just
cool thing to talk about.
you know what and what's funny is like for example, I don't did you buy the Vision Pro though?
Yeah.
No,
Mhm.
did you buy Vision Pro?
Vision
Did you
Pro.
yeah,
Oh
the
no, no, no,
Apple.
no, no, no. I
Okay.
have not. I have not. No.
If you do, I don't want to go there, but I feel something like AI should be there. It
Hmm.
should be AI first. Why?
Hmm.
Because when you're walking by, or you have that AI pin thing, right? Like I wear glasses. What
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is like AI is more of a vehicle. It's a tool, a means to end. Meaning,
Yeah.
if there's a banking use case sector that, hey, I'm someone who's in my mid-20s. I want to know about my product services that I'm using, but tell me how's my spending. There's a
Yeah.
use case, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of companies are maybe missing out, but
Yeah.
they're probably leveraging as well.
I
Yeah,
I 100% agree with you. AI is not some magic genie. It's a
yes.
tool, right? It's a tool just like any other tool. And if you don't use it correctly, it's not going to do anything for you.
Yep, yep. That makes sense. So just to because we're coming by the hour almost. So one more. So you've been in Wells Fargo for how long, Mel?
Oh, like 22 years. It's been a
Wow.
long time.
Okay. So I need something from you. I need either something insightful because two reasons. Number one, when we see in this current economy how things are going, there are a lot of Gen Z folks, millennials. They're like either shifting too many jobs, meaning every 2 years there's this. I don't want to name this person. She is very famous. She wrote a
Yeah.
book, rich person. That's what her persona is about on TikTok. And she's like, you should be changing job every 2 years. Can you talk more about your
Yeah,
journey that,
sure.
with,
Sure. And I'll be honest, when I started at Wells Fargo, I definitely did not think that I would be here this long. So I would frame it a little bit differently,
yeah,
right? You should not necessarily be changing job every 2 years, but you should be learning something new every year, right? And then if the role that you are in and you don't feel like you're learning anymore, you should look for a new role, right? Now, when I say you should look for a new role, it does not necessarily mean change companies, right?
yeah,
And that's one of the reasons why I've been at Wells Fargo for this long is I've had different jobs within Wells Fargo. I have not been doing the same thing for 22 years, right? That's not me, right? Like so if people ask me like, hey, like it's the way I answer is, are you learning? Right?
yeah,
Because technology and business is always changing. It's not static,
yeah,
right? So if you're not learning, you will become obsolete. It does not matter what industry you're in. 100% guarantee you, if you're not learning, you will become obsolete. Then you are basically going to then put yourself out of a job.
Yep.
Right? If you are learning, right, and I have been in the situation where like, hey, like, there's a change, like business is bad, or layoffs, this, that, things like that happen,
Mhm.
not through any fault of your own, right? But to me, learning gives you the mental resilience,
Yeah.
right? And mental flexibility. And I think to me, that's the other key piece is things change, right? So you have to be able to pivot and adjust. It's you don't necessarily have to work in a startup to be able to learn how to pivot and adjust, right? Because no matter what size of a company you're in, shit happens all the time, right? It's how do you roll with it, right? How do you go solve the problem? How do you change directions because you now know something that you didn't know before, right? To me, those are the key things, right? In order for somebody to continue to grow their career. Now, it may be that, hey, I've learned all I can at this company and there's not another role for me, then fine.
Yeah.
Perfectly okay to go to another company, right? But do it with the lens of, am I going to learn something new, right? And yes, like things like money and all of that stuff is of course important. Like you're not there to work for free. Like you're
Yeah.
not, so yes, you want to get paid, but you don't necessarily want to go with the sole lens of, ooh, I can make like 20% more and that's my only reason for doing it. That might lead you down a dead end.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you're saying. I think that's some of a mental shit I had years ago, where I was like, I
Yeah.
need to find a company where I, A, help them grow and ride the wave, and also, vice versa. There's a
Yeah.
lot I can learn as well. And one last question, I promise.
Yeah.
Anything else that's on top of your mind when you look at this economy? Any insightful, like, the Feds, they didn't cut the rates now.
Yeah.
I don't know if she has can you comment on that stuff or no? Sure.
I if I knew what the Fed was gonna do, I would be a very rich guy.
So okay, so that means you can't comment, I guess. So
um, well, no, I mean, like, I'll give you my 2 cents for
yeah.
whatever it's right. Um, I think I think we're definitely entering an era of sort of uh, a different interest rate era. I'll call it that. Like especially younger people, oh, like I thought 3% mortgage is like the norm. It's like, no, it's not. Right? And now that you had that change happen over the last, 2 years, very, very suddenly, and it's caused a lot of dislocation. You had a lot of medium-sized banks go bust, like Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah.
Like, great example. Like when you have a large interest rate shock, right? It is a shock to the whole financial system, right? Some institutions are going to hold up better than others, right? And I think that shock is not going to be a temporary little blip, right?
Mhm.
It's like if you throw a rock into a pond, you see how the waves go back and forth.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're going to see over the next few years, as is in this new interest rate regime environment that we're in, right? How do you price the assets? What does that mean for people holding all of the these assets, right? And you hear about the commercial real estate market, especially in San Francisco. Like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's literally, some of these buildings are worth literally 1/3 of what used to be worth
Yeah.
pre-COVID, right?
Yes.
That's going to have ramifications, right? And some of it is like a slow moving, like a train wreck,
Yeah.
right? Uh, but to me, there's going to be more turbulence along the way, I'll call it.
Yeah.
And we're just watching it happening in slow motion.
Yeah. No, no, no. I have the same, like, I think in the next, I think it's March next time when they're going to talk, right? I think they either may cut or may not cut, which is gonna create more turbulence. So there may be some more layoff, but hoping the layoff will stop happening in March in tech. I did have one question, but I don't know if I should be asking. But I'll just stay away from it. It's more about the economy as a whole, but forget about that. No, thanks, Mo,
Sure.
for giving me the time to have this conversation about the MarTech banking. And I think this in this episode I was able to extract a lot of people may not know how MarTech is useful for someone like Wells Fargo or banks like such, and giving me your thoughts about like the future millennials and not future
Yeah.
millennials, but like the Gen Z and the workforce as well, and the last thoughts. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, have a good day.
All right. Thanks, Imran. Bye.